Welcome in, everyone. Christian O'Jackson here with Noah Fleischman. He covers NC State for the Wolfpacker. Thanks for being here with me, Noah.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So when you were here last year, you were coming off a Final Four run under Kevin Keatts, but it was time for a new era in Raleigh anyway. It was time to turn the page, and here comes Will Wade. All this guy does is win. 58-11 in 2 years at McNeese. After the misconduct at LSU, he leaves. He had to go do something else, but now he's back at Power 5 basketball, and he's in a perfect spot. I think a lot of people are really happy with him. Ending up at NC State just seems like a perfect culture fit. So tell me how exciting it is to have Will Wade in this program and just the new energy he's injected.
Yeah, the fans are really excited when they hired him in March. He was the guy they wanted when kind of the coaching change is going to happen. And you don't always get number one on your list in different coaching changes, especially at the Power 5 level, but they got him. And that's really important. He wasn't going to come unless he felt like the resources were up to par. And they ended up, getting money they needed to build a good roster and things like that. I'm sure we'll talk about what they were able to do with the money, but they raised it. And he matches this fan base pretty well. He's a blue collar guy that all he does is win, and that's all the fan base wants to do. And they like a guy who talks some crap, and he already has, and he can back it up too. So I think he's not afraid of the other two schools in the triangle, and that's something you need to have a coach at NC State.
So the way this roster was constructed, you bring back Paul McNeil's the one holdover, but a lot of impressive names coming through the portal. You got to start with Darion Williams, 15-5-4 at Texas Tech last year. He's just one of my favorite players in the country. Like, averaged 21 a game in the NCAA tournament. He's a winner. He's clutch. He can handle the ball. He can play post up. He can, space the floor. He really does it all. I feel like he's an All-American candidate. What is it like to have him on this program, and how is he, going to function as the true number one option for this team?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how he functions as kind of like the bus driver, because he hasn't been that in his career. He can score. He's proven it again last year in the NCAA tournament, especially. So I think it'll be interesting to see how he adjusts to being the star guy, because right at Texas Tech, he was a good player, but he wasn't the star. And so that'll be the interesting thing. But that's what he wanted when he went to NC State. He came to NC State knowing that he would be the guy with the pressure that they look to score and look to get him the ball. So I'm really interested to see what happens, but he was the big splash they were looking for in the portal. He was there one of their later additions, just because he was in the NBA draft process, thinking about that. But overall, that was the guy that kind of completed, what else they were able to do.
Only shot 34% from deep last year, but he shot 46% the year before. He really is a sniper. Something that interests me about the fit here is on those Texas Tech teams, there was a lot of shooting always, and he had a Big 12 Player of the Year post player. He had some really good point guards, and when I look at the rest of this guard dude, it's a lot of defensive minded guys who are capable, at getting downhill and creating for others like Holloman and Copeland. But I'm interested to see how the pieces fit. So before I get into anyone else, I'm just going to ask you what your starting five projection is, because I have down Holloman, Arsenault, Darion, Ben Allen, Lubin, and then that fifth spot is where I'm most confused.
Yeah, I think you're going to put Matthew Abel in that. He'll be playing at the two, but he would be that kind of fifth starter. I think it's between him and Paul McNeil at the two. Both are shooters. They're going to need both of them to shoot the ball well, as you talked about. There's not really a lot of great 3-point shooters on this team, but those are the two that have the most, skill set to be able to knock them down. But I put Matthew Abel. He was, the number 19 recruit in the country in the class of 2025. So they're really excited about what he can do. And there's a chance, in their heads, if he plays well, he's a one and done. And if that happens, then it was a very successful season for him and a successful season for NC State. So they won't be mad about that. But, I think it comes down to those two, and you're playing Ben Allen Lubin at the five.
Tell me more about Matt Abel. I wasn't able to watch him and play in a game setting, but I know he's highly touted.
Yeah, he's a number 19 recruit in the country, coming out of a Florida school in Tampa. And he was a guy they got when Will showed up. They had to find a high school level recruit that they could make a splash with. And he was committed to Miami, decommitted when they had a coaching change. They were able to go in and make it happen. But he's a 3-point shooter. That's what he does. But he can score at all three levels, and I think we'll see that as well. But for most of the time, we'll see him outside the perimeter, knocking down shots and kind of stretching the defense a little bit more.
Defensively, there's a bar, there's an expectation with Will Wade. Is he, a big, strong athlete? What's he like on that end of the floor?
Yeah, they put a lot of weight on him this summer. I think, we saw him a couple weeks ago. He looks like a grown man, and he's only 18. So I think that has really been an emphasis for him of putting muscle on that frame, getting him going. It'll be interesting to see how quick he adjusts the defensive side of the floor. But yeah, I think the shooting is what's going to keep him on the floor at least at the beginning of the season.
Trey Holloman coming over from Michigan State, a winning player there, a spark plug off the bench, progressed offensively last year, but still inefficient, 37% from the field. A good creator for others, but with him, it really comes down to that perimeter defense. What's it like having him as the, point of attack guy? And do you expect him to have the ball in his hands a lot as a starting point guard?
I do. I do expect him to be the starting point guard. I think they'll play Quadir Copeland at point guard too, kind of as that sixth man off the bench. But yeah, Trey Holloman was a guy they really circled in the portal. They wanted a point guard that was proven, and they found one in him. They were looking for leadership qualities out of a point guard too. He was a captain for Tom Izzo at Michigan State. If you're a captain for Tom Izzo at Michigan State, that means you're a leader, and that's what they're looking for. Defense is definitely what is going to carry his game. He can create for others, but as you said, inefficient shooting toward the end of last year led to kind of him coming off the bench at the end of the year. So I think they're confident that they can get that back, fix a little bit more, but they're going to rely on his defense a lot more than his offense.
I love seeing Copeland as a six-man option. When he was at Syracuse, I always wanted him to play more as a freshman, and then as a sophomore, he kind of came on, but he's very similar to Holloman in what he does defensively and just his energy and how he creates for others, and not being as much of a shooter, although Holloman's definitely a better shooter. But Copeland and Allen Breed bring some of that culture that Wade was building at McNeese. What is it like to have those guys there? And then can I get a health update on Allen Breed, because we only got 2 games from last year. He was awesome in those games and then had missed the season before that. So he's kind of a mystery box what we're getting from him.
Yeah, both guys that came over with Will, obviously kind of as a culture players, in a way they can help establish the culture. They know what he's bringing. Quadir Copeland has kind of been the translator for everybody else. Will says one thing, yells at it. He can kind of communicate. This is what he's looking for. Yeah, I think Copeland will be the kind of the sixth man off the bench, playing point guard, he can play basically a lot of positions at 6'6", but he played point last year at McNeese, kind of at a necessity when Breed went down. And it worked. He was really, he had a lot of turnovers, but he had a lot of assists. They lived with the turnovers, and I think they want them to come down if he does play at the point this year in the ACC. Allen Breed, as you said, he scored 17 on Alabama. This is a guy that played really, really well last year in those 2 games. He's cleared the practice. They've got him back on the court. I don't know how much we'll see of him early in the season. I think they're going to bring him along pretty slow. But this guy that played at Providence, he knows what he's getting out of high major basketball, and I think it'll be interesting to see how quickly they try to insert him into the lineup. But he wasn't cleared until a couple weeks ago, so it's going to take some time.
Terrence Arsenault coming over from Houston. It's rare that players leave that program, but in the NCAA tournament, 4 of the 6 games on Houston's way to the title game, he didn't even score. But a rangy 6'5" wing who, in theory, is a 3-and-D guy. The 3-point percentage hasn't been great. It was at 34%, but he's a guy that I'm confident can shoot at a better clip than that. And obviously the defensive culture from Houston, fitting alongside guys that we've just talked about as other really strong perimeter defenders. What do you expect out of Arsenault here?
I expect him to, be defense first kind of guy right now until his shooting comes back. They anticipate his shooting to come back to what it was as a high school recruit. There's a reason why he was highly touted coming out of high school in Texas. There was a chance, teams had him on their NBA radar kind of those first early years, got hurt at Houston. But he's got 2 years to play. They are really excited about what he can do defensively. They say he's their best defender. They're going to play with him that way. And we'll see what happens offensively. I think this is a lot of guys all sound the same, but they're going to play some gritty games. I think that is what it is. But this is a team that can develop into a pretty good shooting team too.
Van Allen Lubin coming over from Carolina, 4th school in 4 years, Vandy and Notre Dame before that, in the opposite order that I said. But he was really good down the stretch for Carolina. He scored in double digits the last 11 games of the season, and I definitely thought they were a better team the more that they used him. Undersized as a 5'6", but that's nothing new for him. He's been playing this way most of his college career. What do you expect out of Van Allen Lubin here? And I remember Will Wade had a comment, kind of a dig at Carolina of you should have used him more, but we're going to use him right.
Yeah, they're going to play him a lot more. They will have these numbers. If he played 28 minutes a night, his numbers spiked. If he played under, they didn't. They're going to play him a lot. They're going to lean on him as much as they can. Their front court depth isn't great. It's got people there. I'm sure we'll talk about the guys behind him. But I expect him to play really, really well. They expect him to pick up where he left off at Carolina. He was their best player, I think, the last 10, 12 games they played. So really important pickup. He also, Will likes to take shots anytime he can get at any blue school in the triangle. So he used it there. But I think they're expecting a lot from Van Allen Lubin. This is a guy that they waited for in the portal. They kind of knew they were going to get him. He had to wait for his, last NIL check to clear before coming over. But they're going to lean on him a lot.
Size was definitely the biggest question that I had as Wade was throwing this roster together. You bring in Scotty Abube from Wyoming. He only played 10 minutes a game there last year at 6'10". But then in late August, you bring in Musa Sagnia. Tell me about this guy. Is he a guy who could really play here?
Yeah, he's 6'10". He brings height to this team. I think they're going to play him a lot behind Van Allen Lubin at the 5. He was playing in Spain the last 4 years. He's 22. He's a freshman. He was playing professionally in Spain in their top league. Averaged 4 points. It wasn't really no eye-popping numbers, but he's playing against grown men. Will Wade thinks that will translate to playing against people more around his age. That's important. But yeah, he was a late addition. They kind of had to get him in right at the buzzer. I mean, they had 12 hours to go in the enrollment deadline before they got him on campus. It all worked out in the end. So he's here on campus. They're excited. They'd recruited him in April, May, kind of right when they were building this whole roster. They passed on him the first time because they had, a commitment from Paul Mbia. He decommits later on, goes to Kansas, opened up another spot. So then they had to circle back. And that took about, a 3-month circle back window of trying to figure out how to get him on campus, get all of the paperwork done. But they're excited. He's a defense first guy again. But I do think his scoring will actually come a lot better. I think he had 2 double-digit scoring games last year in the pro league. I think we'll see him, if he's a 6 to 8 point kind of guy, I think they'll take it.
And then Abube, is he behind him in the pecking order, would you say?
Yeah, I'd say he's their third. He was kind of, they had to scramble and find a big man. They got him, he played 10 minutes a game last year. Honestly, I think he's 5 minutes a game, 5 to 7 minutes a game kind of guy, unless there's injury or foul trouble pops up. I think he's kind of your backup option at center, but they're really going to roll with Van Allen and Musa for most of the year.
Paul McNeil, as I mentioned earlier, the one returning player, didn't play nearly as much as I expected him to. I remember when I talked to you before the season that you were telling me that this guy was really good. He had 24 against my Deeks. He looked really good in that game. And then I think he had 14 against Miami in the ending game. But if Will Wade's keeping him, he sees the potential that, some people had at the beginning of last season when he was on. So he was like a deep sleeper on some NBA draft boards. But this kid can really shoot the ball. How is he progressing in other areas? And what do you expect from him here?
Yeah, I think the defense is going to be the thing to watch. He wasn't really a great defender last year, but I think a whole year of playing college basketball will help coming into year 2. The thing is, he's their best 3-point shooter. Over the summer, he shot over 44% from 3 on 110, 112 attempts. So he had a lot of tries, in their 5-on-5 scrimmages, shot really, really well. They're really excited about what he can do on that end of the floor. This is a guy, as you said, he was a top 100 recruit. He's a North Carolina kid. He didn't want to leave. Honestly, I don't really think it was much of Will Wade keeping him. I think it was more he didn't want to go anywhere. He loves North Carolina. He doesn't want to go far from home at all. He's, an hour and a half from home right now. So he'll take that. And he's an interesting piece, though. And I'm really intrigued to see how much more they play him. Kevin Keats didn't play him a whole lot at the beginning of last year. He broke out against Wake Forest, kind of in a game where Keats was forced to start him because nothing else was working. And he played well. So I wouldn't expect him to drop 24 a night, but he is the kind of guy that can get red hot from 3 and get into the 20s.
Is the reason they didn't play last year, do you think, that defense, or were there other factors?
There was other things. He was going home a lot. There was a lot of things going on with him and adjusting to the college life. I do think that he should have played more. He told me earlier this summer that basically what it came down to is his, mental state fell into this spiral of, reading Twitter and seeing all the people tweeting, Paul McNeil should be playing and he's not. So he kind of grew frustrated and it wasn't a good combination for a while. But once he, shook that, he was a lot better. He's a lot more mature now. A lot, he's grown a lot in the last, few months. And I think that will serve him well going to a sophomore year. He knows this is a make or break year for him if he wants to play pro. Sophomore and junior years, 2 big seasons coming up for him.
Jerry Dang from Florida State, 7 points in just 15 minutes a game. This is a transfer from Hampton before that. He's a big 6'9" guy who wants to dribble the basketball, wants to play on the floor. He wants to shoot it from 3. And he can shoot it, 37% on 4 attempts per game. Is he purely depth here? But I feel like there's some untapped upside with him. What do you think of Jerry Dang?
Yeah, I think he's going to play. I think he'll play behind Darion Williams at the 4. I mean, Darion can play the 3 or the 4. Jerry can play the 4. He's too small to play the 5. He's 6'9", but there's not a whole lot of weight behind that. But he can shoot the ball, and he'll be a mismatch, I think, for some other fours, because he can defend pretty well. He can switch on the guards. He's quick enough that he can keep himself in front of them. So I think it'll be interesting to see how much they play him. 15, 18 minutes a night. I think that's doable. And I think that it's also doable. He can shoot 35, 40% from 3. If that happens, then, he's going to be a really, really big weapon for them off the bench.
Anyone that I haven't mentioned that you expect to play?
Trying to think. It's a brand new roster, so some names.
Colt Langdon from Butler, Zymika Wilkins, and Jamie Kontunimi are the other names I have down.
Yeah. I think those 3 are kind of more depth pieces right now. Maybe we see a Colt Langdon. He's a guy that's another 4 that can shoot. He redshirted at Butler last year. A kid from Raleigh came home. The other 2 you mentioned, Zymika Williams and Jamie, both freshmen. Zymika, a top 100 recruit, was a Keats recruit that Will Wade decided to keep. And then the other guy is from Finland, who is more of just a depth freshman guard that they can have on the bench.
So that's the roster. Stylistically, when I'm thinking about this often, I mean, we touched on some things of Paul McNeil being a sniper, Matt Abel, what he brings to the table as a shooter, Arsenault being a guy who can shoot the ball better, and then the way that guys like, Breed, if he's good, he's a guy who can shoot it as well. So there is some shooting upside there, and then Dang, we just talked about as well. But then this team's going to turn a lot of defense into offense. They're going to want to run, I assume. Any other stylistic nuggets of how you expect this team to play? Maybe what categories, whether it's on offense or defense, that you expect them to be, towards the top of the ACC or the country. Forcing turnovers is another thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, I think they're going to feast on forcing turnovers. Just what they did at McNeese. Obviously they got more talented players that they can, use, but I think that they're going to use defense to their advantage. Will Wade, he's a guy that is an offensive mind, but he loves to play defense. Coming from a coaching tree like Shaka Smart, who that's what he hangs his hat on, is playing defense at a really high level. So I would expect that to happen. Brandon Chambers, their top assistant, is a defensive mind. He, basically threw the book at Clemson in the NCAA tournament last year, and they did not know what to do. I think they had like 16 points in the first half. Really, we're all scrambled. I think we'll see what he can do against the ACC with better talent on the floor, because I'm excited about this defense. But I'd say defense leading the offense is going to be kind of the book on this team, at least in non-conference play. We'll see if they can evolve throughout the year.
Any nuggets about what you expect the way that Darion is deployed this year? Because like I kind of said when I talked to you at the beginning, there were so many different ways Texas Tech used him, and that's kind of the exciting thing with him is how versatile he is. But like, I don't know, it was down the stretch of that comeback against Arkansas where they were going to him in the post time and time again, but then other times that you got 5 shooters on the floor, they're spacing it with him. And he can face up as well. I know maybe the answer is everything, but any idea of like, is there going to be a lot of pick and pop with him or anything that stands out?
Yeah, they haven't tipped their hand on what they want to do with him yet, but I assume everything they've talked about him, they like how versatile he is, how he can basically do anything and everything. So I'd expect them to not just make him a one-trick pony. I think whatever's working is what they're going to roll with, but it's going to be a matchup thing, right? Whatever team they're playing, how can they exploit their weaknesses with him? That's the biggest thing. So I think early in the season, we'll get a good idea about how they want to use him, but overall, I think it's going to be a matchup based, whether he's going to the post, stepping out. I think he can do a little bit of everything.
You mentioned Copeland being kind of like a Will Wade translator. Any other? So that makes me think that he's a leader of this team. I assume Darion, from his pedigree, is a leader as well. And then Breed was a leader on McNeese, I assume, as kind of their best player those first 2 games. How is that all kind of fusing and just the chemistry developing between all these new players?
Yeah, Quadir Copeland's been a big leader early, kind of just getting the culture that Will Wade wants set in. He's also a guy that's an attack dog on the floor. He'll talk the entire game. NC State played Syracuse a couple years ago. He scored career high 25, 24 in Raleigh. All he did every time he hit a bucket, start yelling at the crowd. Every time he hit a bucket, he enjoys doing that. He's going to keep doing it. He told me that he might turn it up a notch this year. It's his senior year. He needs to get after it. So he's been their biggest leader so far through the preseason. I think it'll be interesting to see who steps up. Trey Holloman is a guy who led a lot at Michigan State. I expect him to be a leader throughout the year as that floor general. And then you talk about Darion Williams. He's just the star player, and everyone's going to look to him for answers too. So those are your 3, I think, that are going to be the biggest leaders in this team, at least for the first few months. We'll see, if any of the younger guys can step up into those shoes too.
A lot of older players on this team, a lot of winners. A lot of talent. Will Wade's definitely got enough to make a splash here in year one. I appreciate you coming on and breaking it down with me, Noah.
Yeah, I appreciate it.